dun, da 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 da. Hi guys. Hello and welcome, guys, to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. Today I have one of my handsome bitches, William, and my good friend and guest co-host, Gina, also known as Mistress Sapphire.
Hello.
Today we are reading and reviewing the last book in Kushiel's legacy, Kushiel's Avatar. This is the last book. Well, I guess it's not. The last book is technically Imriel's
It's the last book in the Kushiel's trilogy.
It's the last book in Phaedre's trilogy, because they're all considered Kushiel trilogy. There's like Kushiel's Legacy. The first three books are Phaedre's trilogy. That's what we're reading. And then the next three. They are also part of the Kushiel's Legacy umbrella, but the first three are Phaedre's trilogy, and that's what we have now officially read and finished. As you know, if you've watched these other videos, this is me and Gina's second read through, and this is Will's first time. So we all enjoyed the first book. We had different things we all enjoyed about it. And then the second book, I think we also all enjoyed, but with some, like, Will had some issues as far with the internal life of some of the characters and the conflict resolution between Jocelyn and Phaedre. So guys, I really, really loved this book the first time through, and I think I might have had some of these same issues with it, but I was enjoying it just to, like, get to the end of the series at the time. And on my second read through, I still enjoyed it, and, like, the Drew John section is still really intense and pretty cool. But I found, especially this time, that there are two separate themes happening in this book and two distinct books that exist. And I think Jacqueline would have been, Madame Carey, would have been better served had she made this two separate books. There's a intensity of the gods having presence in the books. The first book, it's like a little bit. The second book, there's significantly more, and I'll go into more detail by this. And then the third book has, like, a specific thing it does, or the first half has a specific thing it does, but then the last, I'd say third, is doing a completely different thing as far as the relationship between Phaedre and the gods around her. And I don't think they should have been one book. I still really enjoyed it. It was a good read. I enjoyed the last third more than Will did, but it should have been two books.
So I agree with a lot of what Maria said in that this should definitely be two books because, and this is a good time to mention that later on we're going to have a trigger warning because there is a lot of,
oh my God,
a word that rhymes with grape, because this is YouTube. I can't just say the word. We'll have a trigger warning later on when we start discussing that. But do bear that in mind. So there's a part in the book where they, like, venture into, like, death, so to speak. It's in a place called Jujan. That is super intense. And then it finishes and you have 10 hours of the book left to do. And it's so long. And then you have, like, weird adventures and a lot of the tension is gone. And it's one of these things where I think she overwrote it in terms of, like, that is such, I'm sure she didn't do that intentionally, but, like, it's such a powerful moment that the rest of the book is overshadowed by it. I felt like this also was the most thematically incoherent of the three. I still love Carey as a writer, but I don't really think this book is I think this is the worst of the three. A lot of the problems that I saw cropping up in 1 and 2 kind of come to fruition here. I'll talk a little bit about it more, but I feel like it has less of a good handle on the kink aspects of Phaedre. I feel like it also has a worse aspect on the religious aspects. I've said before that I think the better a writer becomes at, like, writing characters and theme and atmosphere and the beauty of their prose, the less good they become at writing a good story, and, you know, vice versa. And I had thought that Carey was just, like, kind of a little bit messy in the first one, and that was going to stop being a problem. But it's actually kind of a problem here, I feel like, in that some of her descriptions are so powerful and so good, and yet some of the basic plotting and internal characterization is not really there. And she also has an issue I've noticed where her characters face these really big problems and interesting problems, and then they just kind of get over it without it really being explored how. Like, the internal journey of it, I feel like, is missing. I still adore Carey. I still adore her writing, but I think I mostly just have criticisms for this book.
I mean, I can agree. I would say that the internal life of the characters, especially for being in Phaedre's head, we don't experience a lot of the blowback of Drew John. It's like Drew John ends, and then immediately we're on the adventure to find the name of God, and that monopolize, and it's what you said in the first book, where there's not enough internal like character stuff happening for the plot
Thematic
bread.
and character arc jelly to
Jelly
spread over the
for the
plot
plot bread.
Oh, it's genius.
Like after Drew John, and this will all make sense when we do the plot going over, guys. But so terrible things happen in Drew John, and like Phaedre and Jocelyn aren't intimate for a very long time afterwards. But you never have a moment of them feeling that lack of intimacy. It's just like we just haven't touched each other. But like this is your life partner for like over 10 years at this point. You guys went through, and there's never that like catharsis. And here's the thing, I love their reconciliation scene because it's just, well, it plays to all of the things I love. Gina's shaking her head. It plays to all of the simplistic, like the joys of a relationship are in those small moments, and it has to do with a fish, and it's fucking brilliant. But I didn't get enough of the catharsis from before. Like you guys just went through fucking hell. Like, it's so, when they're in Drew John, you feel it, and then they leave, and it's like, adventure time. And that's why I think it should have been 2 books, because you could have gotten away with it, where if they finished Drew John, and then if it was a second book, like, they could have been like, it took us a long time to deal with all of the things, and we still haven't gotten back to being intimate with each other, but we can lay in bed next to each other and hug each other. You know, like, you can just be like, that happened, like, in the in-between, and it works, and you can have the adventure.
Well, in terms of just the structure of how books work, there is just when there is a break in a book, all of a sudden your brain resets a little bit because the expectation is for the character arc to start anew. I think also there's a certain lack of ugliness in how they recover from the trauma that happens in Drew John.
It's very not ugly. This is the problem with the distance.
1,000%. It feels like, the distance really helps in certain places, but she feels like she can't scale up to the more emotional moments.
Because, like, the distance helped during some of the uglier moments in Drew John that were horrifying just because they were like you couldn't have had, like, I wouldn't have been able to read the Drew John period if it had been really close to Phaedre's, like, feelings, if it had been her experiencing it as it was happening. I really needed that distance of the older Phaedre narrating for us, and also, like, pulling back a little bit. Like, there were times where, like, she didn't super describe stuff. Opposite end of that is that those emotional, like, in-between character moments that should be happening after those things, I agree, I didn't feel they had. And again, you could have just solved it by making it 2 books. Like, the Phaedre, what do you call it when there's 4 books?
Quartet. No, quartet.
It's a quartet.
The Phaedre quartet, I would have been fine with that.
Except the publishers probably wouldn't be. Publishers like trilogies. 4 books is like, almost no one does 4 books. They either do 3 or 5.
Or a bajillion.
No, she probably did feel some publishing pressure to finish it up in 3 books. And so, like, I agree with Maria. I don't actually think all of the problems would be solved. I think there's still some severe problems, partly because I just don't care about Hyacinth. And so, like, some of the third parts just had issues for me. But, all right, what were your overall thoughts? Gina, I forgot your name for a moment. Mistress Sapphire.
Wow. Thank you, Will. Thank
Look,
you.
it's not a bad title.
What a guy.
No, you forgot my name, though. Did you forget Gina, or did you forget Mistress Sapphire?
No, he forgot Gina.
Gina for a second.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So actually, I think a lot of what you said, kind of, I agree with. It's still my favorite book, and it still is really great because of all the kind of self-development within Phaedre, I think. Like, she had all this experience with, like, the play version of it, and then she's, like, kind of goes through everything, and she herself kind of evolves in a lot of ways. However, I also agree that her relationship with Jocelyn is very flat in this book. It's very, very flat in this book, which, for me, I'm perfectly fine with that. But thinking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that is an issue considering what normal relationship dynamics are like. Like, it's like, to me, I'm like, oh yeah, no, they're fine. It's fine. But like, at the same time, it's like, I would be like this. Normal people wouldn't be like this, and this should be normal people. And at the same time, it's like, well, like, you're right, because, like, the lack of kink part of it is very apparent, because not so much, like, as a reaction to Drew John, because that would be reasonable in every way.
Yes, absolutely.
I like their agreement that it's like, oh, well, she can still do it like 3 times a year and whatever. However, it still just feels like Jocelyn is like putting up with allowing her to do it 3 times a year.
Exactly. That's
Which is not the same a thing as him understanding that she needs it probably more than 3 times a year.
So to jump into the plot just a little bit to explain,
Yeah.
the book starts 10 years after the previous book where Jocelyn was now okay or like more okay with Phaedre indulging in like, well, not indulging, in expressing her kink aspects with patrons. And now it's been 10 years and she does it like 3 times a year. She takes on a patron and that's where she gets it. And the thing is, I feel like Phaedre's kink aspect is very externalized in this book,
Yes.
in that it's treated almost like not an inherent part of herself in the way that kink is for people, but as a thing that's put on her.
And that also how it was previously. Like,
I think in the first book or two, you can kind of read it as, you know, it's Kushiel's dart, but that's just like a description for part of her personality. Whereas in this book, it's literally like, it's a thing that's put on her. And the place that I see it a lot is with Jocelyn, in that she is more or less fine with like the vanilla sex they have when it is, if she gets to do it 3 times a year. And the thing is that in relationships, when you have a deep-seated part of yourself that is not getting indulged or is not seeing expression, it is not a fun thing. Like, there are people who have like broken up with significant others because despite how great they are, they're not into the same kind of kinks. Like, that is a inherent part of yourself that feels stunted if you don't get to express it. And I did not get that feeling from Jocelyn and
Phaedre, I think what we discussed at the end of the second book was if there were ways in which Jocelyn could work in
like the rose
things. Like, if he would have just been like rose thorns, and it's like that's how Phaedre knows shit's getting romantic, where like he's just getting roses and throwing them on the.
There is a little part of this book where she talks about like his he's really slow at one point with his Castleen discipline, essentially, with her, and like kind of a little bit controlling in that way. And I thought that was interesting, in that like that is a way that he can kind of meet her halfway.
But he still hates every time she reacts like that. Like the way it's handled is almost like, okay, well, first 2 books, this is just part of Phaedre. You're right, it's part of her personality. It's just what she does. Like, it's just that's her. And then in the 3rd book, it's almost like you get a treatment 3 times a year, and that'll hold you over so that you can still be happy being with me. And I'm like in theory, like, yes, like you can kind of.
Do you know what would have made it better? If she did assignations with like patrons 3 times a year, but she was going to like the Kushiel's temples pretty regularly, because again, you can separate the sexual.
Or Jocelyn could, like not be an ass, because he's made like no concessions like on his like,
part. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like his concession is she can sleep with people 3 times a year who aren't him.
For normal relationships, that would be a pretty large concession. However, this is Phaedre, a god-marked whore. Like, that's very not understanding her.
Yeah, and he's not meeting her sexual needs halfway. Like, this is a huge... Again, I feel like it's externalized in this book, but theoretically, this is a huge part of who she is, and there is going to be a deep sense of dissatisfaction if she can't express that. And obviously, relationships... Okay, guys. Gina's house is haunted today. We had a bunch of problems with her audio. There was a noise in the background. Now things are falling.
Without being touched, like nobody was there. Rewind the tape, Will. Gina, you would buy a haunted house.
It's not haunted.
What was I saying? I was in the middle of a good point.
He's not meeting her halfway.
Right. I agree with Gina too, in that, yeah, he still kind of just doesn't like it when she does it. And, okay, right. And the thing is, obviously, all relationships are compromised to an extent. That's just how it is. But there is an extent to which there is such a sense of like, and breathing out and not feeling constrained when someone in a relationship understands and meets you on a fundamental level. So like, for example, in one of my relationships, she came from a culture that like was just not like, I'm Hispanic, and like family is really important to Hispanic people, and especially in my family, it's very important. And she came from a culture that like, that was not the way. So she didn't quite understand why I would make certain sacrifices to be, or prioritize seeing my family at certain times or taking care of them or things like that. Whereas another girlfriend I had was Bengali. And like family is also very important to them. And so she did always understand that there was never a moment of like, all right, go ahead and do what you're going to do. And that was so easier to deal with. And it made so much less resentment build up in the relationship. And I feel like that kind of should be more of a part of Jocelyn and Phaedre's relationship, that kind of friction.
Just going back to your whole like Jocelyn's not meeting Phaedre's sexual needs, there's a very easy solution for that in this society that Jacqueline's built, and that is assignations, where she can still be with Jocelyn and still get her sexual needs taken care of by other people. It's completely accepted in this culture. There's not like, comparing it to our culture where it's like kind of taboo. It's like that's just normal for them.
If it would have been like she's going to the Temple of Kushiel, like whenever she needs it, she's doing that. He's throwing roses on the bed when she needs it.
Roses are always romantic. So
exactly, because then it's romantic gesture
specific to Phaedre,
and like it would be, like it would work. It's an easy solution. Some like Yeshuite kids threw it on the bed and you guys didn't take it off. Why did we not learn from this lesson? It was great. And so like all of that would have built, I think, a much lovelier found, because like I love Phaedre and Jocelyn together, but I realized on my second read through that I had put a lot of the work in. Like mentally, I made their relationship work in my head. And it wasn't until I was reading through and I was like, yo, Jocelyn never actually comes to terms with this. They're never at a point where like he is partially meeting her needs in bed with things like that, or like using denial as because like that man can go a while without sex. Like Jocelyn easily could make Phaedre beg for it.
Well, the thing is, Jocelyn in general is almost not asexual because like he clearly enjoys having sex with Phaedre, but he never like gets randy and is like, I need to have sex with you now type of a thing.
So can we actually go devil's advocate here? Because we've been talking about it from Phaedre's side a lot because mostly she's the narrator.
Are you sure you want to invoke the devil in your haunted house?
Oh, that was an evil laugh. You can't make jokes and have that laugh.
That is the laugh of the devil himself.
Like, can we just consider that? Because we've been talking about from Phaedre's perspective, probably because she's a narrator. But you gotta also remember, Jocelyn was heavily trained since he was like 10 years old to never have sex, to judge all the courtesans, to like do like all the things. So from his own development, he has come a decent way. Like, he now will make love to Phaedre. He now doesn't quite judge them so much.
I would believe it more if we would have seen that struggle, because you're right, Gina. He came from an incredibly strict background, and we saw some struggle in book 2, but again, we never got an actual resolution of him coming to terms with it. It basically became, I'd rather deal with it than have you not in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that only works for a short amount of time. Eventually, like, the person's not dead, and you're in the same boat. Like, nothing has changed. Eventually you get used to them not being dead. Like,
and again, that deep sense of dissatisfaction brews and it grows, I agree. And the thing is, like, I just would have liked to see more of that friction between them. They can still be in a relationship. They can still ultimately be in a happy relationship. But if there was more of that interiority, I feel like in general, also, Jocelyn just kind of is not a lot of a character almost in this book. He's just like nice to Phaedre a lot and can fight.
And for me, his biggest and my favorite character parts with him was him bonding with Imriel, and like how he's just good with kids and Phaedre's like, what do?
Yeah.
How dost interact? And he's just like immediately like he's good with animals and kids. Like that's Jocelyn's strengths.
We should jump into the plot though.
Yes. Anyway, okay. Welcome to Kushiel's Avatar, and step 1 I like to refer to as Special Victims Unit, TD, also known as Tierre, because this book opens at the end of the last book. There was like a lady who gave Phaedre a like foretelling and was like, you'll have 10 years of peace and then shit's gonna go bad. And Phaedre like starts the book and she's like, the 10 years are coming to an end. I'm kind of waiting. Like, I was waiting for shit to happen. And then we find out that the old master of the Straits is dead and Hyacinth is officially master of the Straits. Like, he's taken over. This is his life now. She goes to visit Hyacinth and he's like, you cannot help me, Phaedre. I cannot get off the boat. And she's like, I shall find the name of God and I will free you. And then also during this moment, she sees that one of dressed in Mabnectina's sisters has the hots for Hyacinth, and she's like, I don't like that. She also is having nightmares about like little baby Jocelyn being like, Phaedre, or no, little baby Hyacinth being like, Phaedre, help me. And so while that's happening, she also gets a letter from Melisande Shahrazai, who is like, I need your help. I need you to come to La Serenissima now. And so Phaedra, like, here's the thing. This is another thing. I don't know why she couldn't have just put in the letter what she needed, or get one of her spies who are into her. Because, like, they literally, here's what they do. They go to La Serenissima to find out that Melisande Shahrazai's son is missing. Imriel de la Coselle is missing. And where has he been? In a little mountain village, very close to where their summer estate house that they live in is, in Tierre d'Ange. So they go there.
Yeah, they could have just gone straight there. Would have saved him probably, like, what, 2 months?
Yes! Like, oh my god, Melisande, you're supposed to be smart. What the fuck?
No, this is that trope that, like, in TV shows, they can never tell them what's going on with the phone. They're like, you got to come take a look at this. Or like on Star Trek, where they're like, you got to take a look at this. It's like, the bridge and engineering are pretty far away. You could just Skype in what's happening.
Or just send it. Like, just bloop, 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 bloop.
In a letter, I'm like, meh. But, like, one of her spies that she trusts so much.
That lives in Tierre d'Ange, who she's already sent to an...
Go up to Elwa's temple, be like, hey, the guy's not here. Stop down, say, hey, can you please help? And then peace out.
Exactly. Like, I don't... Anyway, so they go all the way to... And at first, Sandra's like, no, I don't want you to do this. And then Phaedra's like, but you gotta trust my gut. Remember the last time you didn't trust my gut and it went badly and you nearly died? And Sandra's like, fair the fuck enough, okay. But anyway, so they go there, and basically she's like, I need you to help me find my son. And Phaedra's like, why don't you have your spies do it? And she's like, I already tried, they didn't do it. It has to be you. And if you do it, I will give you the key. Because the other thing you discover is in the past 10 years, she's been studying a lot of Yeshuite lore, trying to find the name of God.
That's why she needs to go there, so she could give her the scroll.
She could have been like, bring him to La Serenissima when you're done, and I'll give you the scroll.
Yeah, but for plot purposes, she needed the scroll ahead of time because she was working through it during all of it.
Mail it. You could have mailed it. Again, she mailed a letter from La Serenissima to Tierre d'Ange.
Well, and she did mail.
Look, I'm just glad Carey didn't spend forever talking about how they're traveling. It's very much like, okay, we went there and then we came back, thankfully.
That would have been 3 books if she had.
I want to say that I did not like Melisandre's position in this book.
I don't like Melisande at all. That's a lie. I do like her.
Yeah, I know. I felt like she should feel more like a trapped animal in that she has been living in the same 400 feet, for the last 10 years. It's set up that she's actually kind of gaining power in La Serenissima as like a pseudo Asherah by the sea, which is their god or whatever. But she doesn't feel she's totally chill. She's still totally in control.
Well, do you really think that she never left that building?
I think that it's weird that Isandra didn't put guards on that building.
From Melisandre's perspective, she's getting power. That's most of what she needs. She can probably have people come over to, like, have tea with or whatever the fuck as often as she wants. Like, it's not...
I get that, but I find it literally, I would have found it more interesting if she felt like more, like she had actually paid a price. Because I was promised by Maria that we were going to get a scene where Melisandre got her comeuppance, and I, as far as I know, never got it.
No, Phaedra tells her, your son's been taken for no goddamn reason. Kushiel is punishing you. And Melisandre's like, oh, fuck, this is the price I pay. He literally punished my innocent goddamn son for my sins. Because that's the only way. You can punish Melisandre all you want. She doesn't give a fuck. She loves her kid. Her kid was taken, and literally, we don't know, it's never confirmed, but definitely some sex assaults was hip-hap happening. Like, that's the way you get Melisandre. That's how you fuck up Melisandre. And that's, like, I'm happy with that because that's the only thing she cares about.
Well, and the second thing that she cares about is power. So, like, Lysandra's whole thing of, like, you have to stay in this building is to restrict her ability to have power, essentially. And Melisandre's like, I'm sorry, what was your goal here? Because you failed. Like, she's not gonna feel trapped. Like, she's doing exactly what she wants to do. She's just in La Serenissima instead of Tierre.
Yeah, I'll talk about this more later, but I think part of it is that for me, Melisande is the same super powerful, cool person that she was in the other two books, and to me, it feels almost a little boring.
I don't know. She felt kind of crippled to me.
Not enough for me, especially because she still holds so much power over Phaedre. I would have liked to see more of, especially after Drujon, Phaedre breaking from that power. It would have been a nice little arc, I think, in terms of like...
I would have liked that at the end. Like, literally, she met the Makagir, who is like whatever Melisande is, the Makagir was worse. Like, on the spectrum. So, like, Melisande should be less enticing now because she's seen the absolute other
She
end.
went to like hell essentially on Earth, and now she's like, oh, but Melisande, I still whatever. And she's holding the word of God on her tongue with Melisande. Melisande still has power, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, it's a little bit. I would have liked to see a little bit less powerful of Melisande.
They go to La Serenissima. Please rescue my baby. It has to be you. I'll let you. I'll give you this map and a guide to get you to the place where I think the name of God can be found. That's what Melisande says. And Phaedra's like, well, I really need that for Hyacinth because it's really weighing on me that he's been stuck on that island and can't get off for 3 years. And like Hyacinth does feel like a man who has been trapped. Like when you begin to interact with him again, he feels like a man who has lost his fun soul a little bit and who's going a bit stir crazy. So like, okay. And here's my problem is, again, I think the rescuing Hyacinth plot and this plot are not super related. Like, I didn't love that that's how Melisande convinced her to go do this thing. Or, like, if it was just, like, I'll point you in the right direction, and then book 4 was doing that. It was a weird, like, these two plots didn't super feel connected.
She's marrying them directly in a way that doesn't really work thematically, too.
But it has to work because it probably had to be 3 books.
It probably, and that's the thing is, if we think about it from the point of view that she probably had to make a trilogy out of this bad boy, but she had set up Hyacinth being rescued from the beginning. Okay. They go back to Tierre, and they're like, yo, Isandra, we know where Imriel was for the past 10 years. But he's missing now. We have to rescue him. And so they go to, like, the place where he originally was, like, lived. He'd been a shepherd boy. Like, he was living in a temple of Elua. Like, literally, like, a hop, skip, and a jump away from Montreve, which is their summer estate. So they start doing, as I said, Special Victims Unit, TD, where they're looking for Imriel. They're following clues. They end up finding... I'm going to go through things pretty fast. They end up finding out that he was taken by slavers. And because in the beginning, everybody thinks somebody found Imriel, and this is a political move to get back at Mel. Like, she made her bed, and it's politics that have gotten her in this position. And then they realize, nah, another little girl, completely unrelated to anything, was kidnapped. And then somebody saw 3 kids being taken out of the country and was like, yo, your guy was probably one of those. And then Phaedre has this realization where, like, she hears this, she realizes that it's not political motivated, and she hears the iron wings of Kushiel flapping, and she's like, oh fuck, Kushiel did this. This is her punishment. Like, this is what's happening. So then they have to go to, like, 3 different places to continue following the trail. They have to go to the country where the slavers were from. They get there. They find out that Imriel, like 3 months ago, killed the slaver who got him by stabbing him in the thigh. And then he was sold off to somewhere else. And they end up in Iskandria, which is Egypt.
That part of it in particular felt like we probably could have skipped that.
Oh my God.
Like, nothing happened. Like, oh, the Pharaoh might have him. Oh, wait, no, the Pharaoh doesn't have him. Like, oh, does the Pharaoh serve a plot purpose? No. Melisande uses him to deliver one message on the way home. Like, that whole thing had no purpose. Like, on either side, like, going or coming back. It had no purpose.
No, and the thing is, again, Carey is extremely good at writing politics and making it feel real and different cultures and all of that. But she kind of gets, I think, overly enamored of it, and it doesn't really serve the plot or the characters.
The only thing that it even, like, slightly touches on is the fact that someone crossed his shadow and they died.
The bone priest.
But they could have missed that. Like, they could have done that any other way.
And they could have followed his trail, because they end up going to Kabul-i-Makad, and they could have had the whole bone priest and learning about the bone priests there. Like, there was no reason to do it somewhere else. But they end up they end up in Aragon. They end up in like this other place. Like it's just.
And the thing is, nothing in a character or thematic sense is really happening during these portions.
Again, it's investigation. Like I said at the beginning, there is always the investigative period of these books where they're like, getting information. And this is the investigation period.
Yeah, Jocelyn says a lot of snappy one-liners and then takes off his glasses.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that, there is this investigation thing, because like otherwise it's like, hey, we found that the kids, these two kids didn't die, but Imriel escaped, and then all of a sudden like they know exactly where to go. Like I appreciate that there's like some in between to explain how they got there, but I also feel like each location could have been like one shorter chapter rather than like a couple each.
Have them just go to 2 places instead of going to Aragon and then going to the place where the slavers are from, and then from there going to Escondria. Like just have 2 places.
Maybe it was because like they needed to go to more places, because otherwise it'd be like no one else could have found this trail. Like it needed to be more steps, which is why I'm saying like if it needed to be that more steps just to make it like as complicated as it is, they could have shortened the chapters, because it's the equivalent of like 10 chapters between those 3 places or something like that.
And there was several dinners with the like people that went with them while they were in Escondria, and like the Egyptian politics that were happening. And I'm like, no, I'm not here for this, Carrie. Let me go.
I mean, like, I like the little boy who was like their escort in like the Egypt area. However, he would have been a great character for like 2 chapters, and then you leave.
Yeah, no, it's too much plot bread and too little thematic and whatever else jelly to go over it. So you're just like, all right. One thing I will say is that there is a nice sense of looming dread of like, oh, something's going to happen. Something not good is going to go on. And one of the things that does happen is...
We already knew that, though. Something not good happens every single book.
Well, I mean, also, it could have just been looming dread for 2 chapters instead of 17. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not palpably different from the beginning to the end.
She writes looming dread very well, as we've seen in the past 2 books, especially in book 2. Book 2 has the best, them getting, like, investigating Phaedre, putting all the pieces together in La Serenissima, and then finding out what's happening with Melisande was, like, very much payoff. So, we already know she writes good looming dread. She could have probably done it in less time. So, they get a little, like, street urchin boy who like shows them through the streets, and then like there's this guy and they're like, oh, the Scotofagotis, if you cross his shadow you will die. And Phaedre and Jocelyn are like, wow, these superstitious Escondrians. But there's this one moment where like some cart guy like crosses a Scotofagotis,
which we're gonna call bone priests from now on because it's way too easy to mispronounce that.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
He crosses a bone priest, and then later they hear about like some dude at a cart tournament died.
Chariot. It was
chariot. There we go. That's the word that I'm looking. It was a chariot race.
Tournament. Some kind of cart tournament, like just like rolling down office hallways with like a utility cart, like receiving
hay in the back.
That's exactly what it was. It's like Hercules with his dad and the cart.
Wait, that's in the Savior's Champion. That's how Tobias's father died. He was in an illicit cart accident.
Anyway, they find out that guy ended up dying that day. Like, and so they were like, oh, maybe these people are a little bad. But anyway, they find out that like Imriel was sold to one of these bone priests who is taking him to this place called Jujan. And they're like, what is Jujan? And they're like, oh, it means like land of the dead. It used to be called this other name, and it was like the place of flames because they worshipped Ahura Mazda. But now it's like, it's bad. Then they go to Kabali Makad, where they learn that like this place used to be like this one religion, but then they got into a fight with like...
I could not quite tell which Middle Eastern analogs they were supposed to be in each place.
Yeah, I had trouble with that. The only reason I know that one was Egypt is because they had a pharaoh.
The Drujan place was taken over by this other group of people who literally slaughtered, like just went in, slaughtered, turned out all the fires for Ahura Mazda, and what ended up growing out of that was a very sick, evil power. What was that god's name? I can't remember. It'll come to me. But this bad, no good, very bad.
Death.
And like hatred Like, all of that stuff fueled him. And so because the other people had come in and literally massacred everyone, there was a lot of negative emotions, negative feelings to fuel this other god. And so he ends up taking over, and then the Drujani start fucking everybody else's shit up and like being real weird. So everyone's kind of scared. Like, nobody will go into Drujan. And so like when they go to Kebali Makad, Barkiel Longver's daughter is married to one of the like princes. They get help from her, and they're like, basically, we'll like give you a guide, and you can go into.
Well, okay.
Yeah, you're right. You go. You can talk about this.
So what happens is they're basically like, we're not going in there, and the delegation sent by the queen to find Imriel is like, all right, this is the end of the line. We're not going in there either.
We've done as much as we could.
Right. And at this point, Phaedra's like, okay, I'm not going in there either. But then she has a vision of essentially the Scarlet Mote, which is Kushiel's dart, beginning to fade from her eye. And she sees Eloa and Kushiel like receding in terms of like, it's their will that she goes in there, and she can go against it, but she'll lose that god touch.
Which is a cheap trick.
It's a cheap fucking trick.
We'll talk about it in a minute.
Thank you. She literally feels the love and happiness of Eloa fill her up. And then she's like, no, God, I can't. Like, you're asking too much. And then he's like, that's fine. And then just leaves. And she's just left with emptiness. And you're like, that's not a choice. You didn't actually, because her religion, her connection to her gods, her love of Eloa has always been very important for her. So, like, that was a fucked up move, guys.
It's a cheap trick to just be like, you can do what you want. We just don't care about you anymore.
That's what abusers do.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, well played. I think the other thing about it to me is that thematically, it's not very interesting. Okay, so the thing is, we're dealing with faith in this moment. We're talking about Phaedra's faith and her relationship with God. And the problem is that outside of like Christian book literature, where just having faith in God is it's treated as a first principle good thing, and characters need to do that.
Christian book literature? You mean the one Christian book? The one?
The Bible? No, I'm actually thinking more like Christian movies where it's like just treated as having faith in God is always a good thing.
Oh, okay.
And so like that's treated as a first degree, like just good thing, just have faith, good things will happen to you. In this case, because it's like real literature, you need to ground why the character has this faith, what that means to them, and what it would mean to lose it. So for Phaedra, we never really get an examination of why losing Kushiel's dart, which has made her life harder in a lot of ways, and especially now, we go back to talking about Jocelyn. If she doesn't have Kushiel's dart, it makes her relationship with Jocelyn easier. And that's one of the reasons I say that her relationship with Kink is externalized a lot in this book. It's treated as a thing from God, not a thing from herself.
Losing that, because it's been such a huge part of her entire life, losing that like Kushiel's chosen issue would completely destroy her, honestly. Like, that is what her entire life is based on. Not only like her income or whatever, but like that is who she is, and you're just going to take that away from her.
I totally agree. I wish the book had explored that in terms of like her even thinking like, who am I without this? What does my life look like?
Like, if there was a moment as it was beginning to pull away from her, of her going, I don't know who I am with that. Like, it is since birth, I have been that. You would turn me into essentially a different human. I can't live that way. And again, all you would have needed was that process. And it could have happened during her, like, feeling the God presence and her having that flashback of like, because I mean, Phaedra goes on tangents all the time in the middle of things, so it's not like it would have been. It's not like it would have been out of place.
I think that like that distance that you were talking about though is like part of it, because like she wasn't really narrating her thought process during that. It was just oh, I can feel the love like leaving me, which is like what you say when you're remembering it, but like there wasn't that narration of like, this is what I was thinking
at that time. And that's honestly a thing that in moments, and we mentioned this before, where that can hinder this book a bit, because there are moments where we are not like feeling the intensity of the thing that Phaedra is obviously feeling based on the decision she makes after that, which leaves you, like Will said, going, but why? Like, would it be, like, if Phaedra says, like, oh no, I am Kushiel's dart, like, it is, I've been that way since birth, and to have it taken away, because otherwise you can look at it and go, well, yeah, her life probably would be easier, and she's got all her brains and the other stuff she has, and so having the author give you that internal narration and that internality would have just been really great in that moment.
I think going back to what Gina said too, in that it's okay for this moment for her to cling to Kushiel because she doesn't know who she is without that, and she doesn't know who she is without Ellawa's love. But then that also needs to be something that she grows past in the next part of the book, which doesn't really happen. Even when she learns the name of God himself, and she should be like wielding God's power at this point and moving past the need for a God's abusive love. Well, not abuse, not super abusive, but, and she also could have just demanded of Ellawa, like, no, you don't have a right to take your love away from me just because I'm not doing what you want, you know? Or it could have been something where she felt Kushiel in that moment drawing away, and then later she learns that Ellawa loves her no matter what. That would have also been a different relationship with God.
I made a point that this book is dealing with two fundamental relationships with God. Being a tool of God who is set on a path, on a journey, and a fate to go do something. And then in the next part, she is challenging a God for her own benefit. Like, because Kushiel and Ellawa do not give a shit about freeing Hyacinth. They are not involved in that decision. So after the end of Drujan, because basically Ellawa and Kushiel are like, Drujan's a threat, you need to go deal with this. And we've sent you on a wild fucking goose chase and used Imriel as a lure to make you go do this thing. Again, guys, okay, that's a lot to put on like two people. Fuck y'all. But anyway, but after that, like once she saves Drujan, she feels like she's still got all the things, but then she goes on a journey that has nothing to do with her faith. Because technically, every journey she's been on previously has been for Terdange and the world she loves. The last third of this book is Phaedre going on a journey for Phaedre, what Phaedre wants. Phaedre wants her friend Hyacinth freed, and she's gonna fucking do it, and she's gonna challenge a god for it. She's gonna learn the name of God. She's gonna challenge a fucking angel to a water duel. She's going on this journey. Ellawa and Kushiel don't give a fuck. So what should have happened in this book was at the end of that, Phaedre, you're right, Will, moving past, and again, you could have had the plot stay the same, but just adding these narrative like moments of her being like, I am done being a tool for the gods. Now it's my turn. I'm doing what Phaedre wants. Starts today, bitch. Like, I've done what I needed to. What the gods have asked of me is over. Now I'm living for me.
That's how Maria would talk to God, but that's not necessarily how Phaedre would talk to God.
Yeah, but anyway, the point is, book one is mainly about saving Terdange and her learning that as Kushiel's dart, it's not just whippy fun stuff, but she also has the ability to, like, because she's Kushiel's dart, manifest and, like, help things and, like, be a mover and shaker in the world. Book two is her bargaining with another god and trying to save her homeland. Book three is her gods being like, nah, bitch, now's the time. You got to do our work. And then what should have been book four would have been her being like, it's for me today, you know, like, that's, like, again, that's it. It's, and the thing is, it's all there. All of those things happen, but if you just frame them a skosh differently, it makes so much more thematic sense.
Yeah, it's odd. It's odd. It's there, and we're not gonna, and it doesn't come in. But anyway, at that point, her and Jocelyn's like, God, do we have to do this? And Phaedre's like, yes, we have to go do this. And Jocelyn's like, all right, I guess I'll go with you.
The hell and back. As he has said before, except he didn't know. He actually meant it this time.
I feel like Jocelyn stops being much of a character, and I would have liked to see, again, more interiority in his struggle.
I think part of the reason why he stops being a character, assuming that it's not because of writing style, part of the reason that I think it makes sense for Jocelyn to stop being a character while they're in Drujan is because he has to shut off so much of himself in order to put up with being there. So, like, when you're repressing that much of yourself, like, yeah, there's not much left for be a character.
That's absolutely valid. But the point is, then there should have been a difference in how he was handled after they get out of Drujan. Like, he shouldn't have been able to turn it back on, because outside of the, like, sex stuff, Jocelyn and Phaedre kind of fall back into their natural relationship almost immediately. And so if we had him stuffing down for like 6 months, they were there a while. It was not a short time. If there was that much of shoving himself down and turning himself into this caricature of what people expected of him, then I would have loved, again, what we talked about earlier, grappling with that. How does their relationship heal from this massive thing?
Very quickly, at this point, we're going to be issuing a trigger warning because Drujan has a lot of assault and stuff like that. If I'm able to, I'm going to put up on screen a time skip that you can skip to after we're done talking about those portions. But please bear in mind that probably the rest of the discussion after that will make references to what happened there. I'm going to try to do the best I can to not, to help you guys out, but that's, you still may want to take aware.
Well, I think we can make a point to not talk about it when we're talking about the Word of God, because it's not really necessary to talk
we'll
about.
see.
Okay.
So they get to Drujon, and what they discover is that, like, Drujon is now worshipping a new god, that god of, like, evil, just evil, god of evil, instead of the god of light.
What is it? Like evil words, evil acts, evil thoughts, evil words, evil deeds.
It's like Dush Vista, Dush Vashta, and Dush... why do I remember that? Why is that in my head?
I can barely remember Gina's name. Are you kidding?
He was at Gina's house last weekend, guys. Like, I don't want you to think, like, he literally was in her house last week
for like 4 hours.
There's no reason for this.
He has a really great dog.
I do have a really great dog. I have 2 really great dogs, but one is better.
Gandhi.
No.
Anyway, and they basically get there, and what their plan is that the Makagir, who's the new ruler of Drujon, has been amassing a zenana, a harem, and getting beautiful women and men and boys imported in. And so they're like, okay, the plan is we're going to go in. Jocelyn will pretend to be a Dongeline noble lord who's on the run because he stole a woman, and now he just wants to get rid of her, and he's going to join the Makagir's forces and present Phaedre as his ticket in. And the Makagir is like, awesome. But the Makagir is described as, like, kind of childlike in his enjoyment of the fucked up shit he does. Like, there's a childlike enthusiasm to him. And what his backstory is, during the night where that other country came in and slaughtered everyone, he was the bastard son of the previous ruler who had been born to one of the whores in the Zenana. And he ended up under a pile of bodies. Like they just kept putting dead bodies on this pile, and he was just underneath it alive the whole time. So he watched his mother being raped and getting killed, and then just body after body after body. And then eventually he's found by this really big, strong guy who's like sorting through the thing. They find him, and he raises him, and eventually he's found. The bone priests develop because this one guy who used to be a priest of Ahura Mazda is like, no, we now worship this other god who I can't remember, but Phaedre can literally feel when she's entering Drujon the evil presence of this other god.
It's super atmospheric too, in terms of like,
God.
It sounds cartoonish, but it feels so dark and real.
This portion of the book is by far like the hardest thing to read, as far as like just it weighs
and
you.
It's everything. Like it's not just like the sex, it's not just the slavery. There's also like the dog issues, like it's everything.
The dirt, like it just it's really hard. But anyway, the Makagir is like, yeah, I'll take her. And then there's this moment where like he says or does something, and like Phaedre reacts in the way Phaedre does, where like, you know, unintentional
sploosh
being turned on, and the Makagir is like, I saw that. Delicious. And she ends up getting taken to the Zenana, and it's like this dank, damp, dark, terrible place. There's puddles of like fetid water. People have like these couches, and like groups of women amass around them, but it's dark. There's no natural light.
It almost reads like a classic like opium den type harem thing, like, which is like the fantasy version. Like it's almost like it reads like that, but like almost like this is the real version of it, where it's like it has the same elements. Like you have people lounging on the couch, like getting like wasted basically on opium and everything like that. Like it has all the same elements that you would see in some kind of like Penny Dreadful type environment, except this is like the real version where people are doing that for real reasons.
Yeah, it's very true. There's like, this is the underbelly of what it is. And I should also mention at this point that like Middle Eastern representation in this book is not great.
Angraminus. Sorry.
That's the god.
That's the new evil angry god. Angraminus. Sorry, guys. I got it. Anyway, continue, Will.
No, I was just saying that the Middle Eastern representation in this book is a little problematic in terms of like, this is the ultimate evil spot of swarthy people.
What I do like is they make the distinction, what Carey does, which I think saves her a little bit, is that Ahura Mazda was fine. Just a normal god, bringer of light. You know, they fought with Kabali Makad, but like it was all within that. But then when this terrible massacre happened, and it's like there's this particular evil god that came in and fucked shit up, because at the end they like escape Darsanga, liberate Drujan, return it to the Aka Magi, which were the Magi of...
There is a sense within Carey's writing, and I mentioned this with Skaldea in the first book, that you get the sense that these are cultures that are doing a thing because that's politically expedient, or in this case, because they have a leader who's worshiping an evil god, but it's not necessarily inherent to who they are. But it's still just a little bit like side eye sometimes.
I think that is problematic, but not because it's like seen as the root of all evil. I think it's problematic because it feels like all of it is stereotyped.
Orientalism.
Like with the other culture, the other books, like it felt like, oh, she did research. Like this is a deeper dive into like Italian Sicilian culture or whatever, like that I hadn't realized. Like, you know, it feels like it's removing layers and into like works like the Flower War thing, like that, you know.
Or the Skaldea Homestead songs.
Yeah, but this is very much so anything that you've learned in America propaganda for the last 10 plus years. Like,
I also thought that with where Phaedre had to be veiled and she really hated it, but like Phaedre's had to wear a lot of interesting things, and I would have loved it if she would have viewed it as like a great way to accessorize. Like she picked really flamboyant, like extravagant veils, but it's presented as, oh, women must be veiled, and that's a no.
Yeah, and it's the same kind of issue that she had in La Serenissima, where she wanted to free the courtesans and everything like that. Like, you know, that's the reason why she has that attitude, and like I can understand it, but at the same time, it's just like you could have gone into like the reason why that's a thing more so than just like, oh well, women have to be oppressed, but like there's actual reason for why that came about.
There is a cultural context for it,
and that's never explored.
Maria had told me about a video talking about Iron Widow, and I'm going to quote it third hand because Maria told me about it. But anyway, it was a Chinese historian talking about the history behind foot binding and the ways that integrated with the culture, and that, yeah, it is kind of a terrible thing to do, but there are kind of it's a deeper thing rather than just a binary good bad.
And a lot of modern historians are looking at the way foot binding was a thing like women did with other women, how it could be bonded, like how you know, despite it not being like a great thing, there were things that made it, and so it's a recontextualizing this thing that it's just like, oh, foot binding is bad. Why would you do that, you terrible, non-civilized country? And these historians are looking at it in this recontextualized, more nuanced way. And it's fascinating, and that's how we should be. And you don't get that here with the Middle Eastern.
And I get kind of why, in terms of like, you want to, in a horror movie, you don't want to go like, oh, when does Jason go to the bathroom? You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain amount to which you're just supposed to essentialize it down to the darkest, most unrelenting claustrophobic elements. But that in itself is sort of a problem when you're doing it with a Middle Eastern culture.
But this was a problem during that entire travel montage before they even got to Jujan.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
Before you even get to horror movie
with
style.
The veils, like, you know, like she finds like immediately distasteful. She doesn't look at them and like, oh wow, they're so gorgeous and exotic, and like their eyes are beautifully done, and like
the veil thing in particular, Melisande is constantly veiled now
in Serenissima,
and it's not even though it's the same act, and it's not viewed even remotely similar to Phaedre.
Yeah, that's a good point. European veils are cool, and Middle Eastern ones are oppressive.
Like, Melisande chose to join the group of Ashirat, and they just so happened to wear veils. But like, to be part of that community, you have to wear the veils. Like, it's not like if you want to be part of that, there's no like you can join, but you don't get to wear the veils. Like, nah, it's still so it's just it is weird, and it's the one place where like you lose that richness, especially in Jujan, especially in Darsanga, because all we're getting is the culture post Angra Mainyu being in charge. Not any, like, you get so little about what this place was like. And that, I think, would have done a lot, is if she had someone that she could talk to that knew what Jujon had been like.
You get a little bit after it's over. Like, you get a little bit of the explanation of, like, the eternal flame, and then you go on the, like, going home montage, which is actually much better done. Because the going home montage, you get a lot of culture.
Yes. And what I would have really liked is if she spoke to someone who was like, no, this is what, like, day to day was like. You know, we had a festival where, like, everybody lit the fires and, like, everybody came, like those kinds of things that you got in La Serenissima, that you got in Scaldia, those things that gave, like, a rich cultured texture, and you just didn't get that in Darsanga.
I don't know if you would have been able to, though, because most of the women who were in that, like, harem area were foreigners. They were brought in from other...
One of the guards, there was that one guy who was actually the eunuch, who was actually, like, who was friends with
Eric.
Eric, as she says it. You could have gotten more. I don't, like, she's done it in so many ways.
There are ways to add it in, but again, it would kind of detract a little bit from the claustrophobia of it. So I understand why it's difficult, but it's just not great. But anyway, back to the plot.
She gets put in the Zenana. They're like, oh, it's not good. She meets this one lady, Kanika, who is from
Africa Place. They're right by Queen Victoria Falls, which is a big lake in
Zimbabwe. She meets Kanika, and she knows that, like, she has to go. Eventually, she's going to have to go travel through this land, and she's trying to learn Jabez, and she's learning it from a school. So she tries to become friends with Kanika, and Kanika is like, no, little one, you don't need to learn anything. You're going to die. We're in the fucking Zenana. Like, what are you doing trying to learn a language? And Phaedre's like, you know, it could be useful. There's politics within the Zenana where if you're the Makagir's favorite, it's kind of good for everyone else, because the more time he spends on you, the less time he spends torturing other people. And Phaedre's not exactly sure what happens, but everybody's kind of fucked up. There are literally some women from, like, the India analog who are, like, happily starving themselves to death in the choice of, like, in the hope that they will die and be out of this situation. And there's very much, like, she doesn't know what's happening, but she knows it's real bad. Like, people come in bloody, bruised, beaten, broken. Right at the start, it's like this woman from Chin who is his favorite person at the time, and she ends up dying pretty quickly. And then he turns his attention to, she doesn't see Imriel for, like, the first, like, 2 weeks, because he's in solitary confinement because he stabbed a guy in the dinner hall.
He likes stabbing people.
He got spun. Imriel at this part is like an angry cat who's just like like just, you're gonna get you. Like, there's no softness about him, which is sad, because you got the impression when they were, like, talking to the other kids at the, like, shepherd place, that he was, like, fun and chill, and he had a good sense of humor, and he was, like, charming. You don't meet that kid for a while. Anyway, eventually the Makagir starts turning his eyes on Phaedre. It sucks for Jocelyn, because, like, now Jocelyn is one of his sworn warriors in the festal hall, and then, like, the Makagir will bring Phaedre in and just, like, pinch her nipples or, like, slap her in front of people, which, of course, Phaedre reacts in the way Phaedre reacts, and Jocelyn literally has to watch it. This is what I'm saying when I say, like, there should have been more blowback. We should have seen more. Like, Jocelyn is literally having to watch the one thing he's never wanted to see.
And cannot react.
And can do nothing, and has to pretend he's okay with it. And also that he doesn't give a shit about Phaedre. It really sucks.
And also that Phaedre is into it, which again is like, that is the darkest part of her soul, and he probably never saw it that way, and that would kind of change how he sees her. And that's one of the things, is that everybody knows she's kind of into it in that way, and so, like, everyone in the harem hates her. They call her Death's Whore. There's a scene with her in the Makagir, and it is brutal. In a lot of ways. I don't really feel it's necessary to go into it, but it's brutal in a lot of ways. But she's still kind of into it, because that's Kushiel's
start for you. It really sucks to listen to. And again, you get the benefit of that distance that we've talked about, because you're not in Phaedre's head while it's happening. Like, she's narrating it back, like, what she remembers of it, how she feels about it now. And he's, again, there's this, like, it's also kind of creepy, because again, he has that, like, childlike enjoyment for all of it,
and he starts liking Phaedre.
Yeah. So there's this big thing. I'm not going to spend too much time going over what happens in Jujon, but there's this big thing with the bone priests where to get their power, because they have actual power, like they got some magics, evil magics, but how they get it is a guy who used to be one of the Aka Magi for Ahura Mazda. After all the shit went down, he began to feel the presence of Angra Mainyu, and basically how you get it is you have to kill someone you love, and then you make a girdle, like a vest, out of their bones. Because the idea is, if you can kill someone you legitimately love for power, that is the most evil act. And so you have made yourself a vessel for the anger of Angra Mainyu. And they're trying to turn the Makagir into a bone priest, like the ultimate, like he will bring Angra Mainyu, he will be the vessel for Angra Mainyu on Earth. But the problem is the Makagir is kind of crazy, and he has never loved anyone or anything. Once when he was young, he talks about it that he maybe loved a dog, but that was a long time ago. And now he lights dogs on fire for fun. It's not good. Anyway, and so what he's been doing, the reason he's been collecting this harm, or why the bone priests have been collecting this harm, is in the hopes that maybe he will fall in love with someone. Phaedre is the perfect someone because he knows she loves in that deep, dark part of herself what he's doing. And he is like, there's this part where she describes it where he looks at her with wonder in his eyes. Like, just like, oh, wow, someone like you exists. And you're like, oh no, this terrible. So Phaedre gets fucked up after that first meeting, and she comes back from it in that languid, that look people have after they have a massage. That's what Phaedre looks like coming out of seeing the Makagir, and that's how Imriel sees her for the first time. So all Imriel knows is this crazy ass bitch who comes from my homeland likes this shit. And so he hates Phaedre. She ends up making friends with this woman who is a doctor.
I really liked her.
She was such a cool character. I loved her so much. Anyway, she makes friends with that lady, because that's the only lady, after she comes back from the Makagir, the only one who will come help her. And it's weird because she comes to treat Phaedre, and she's very icy. And then Phaedre explains, I am God's touched. I have this blessing or a curse, however you want to look at it, where pain equals pleasure for me. And that lady's like, oh shit, this has got to be a nightmare for you. And Phaedre's like, you have no fucking clue. And so they bond, but she's like, nobody else is going to really believe that. And because Phaedre's like, can you help me get Imriel? Like, I'm here to rescue that kid. I need you to get him to talk to me. And she's like, I'll try, but he's stubborn as fuck. Anyway, she sees the Makagir, things happen. Eventually, she starts developing a better relationship with the ladies in the Zenana. Imriel begins to come around because of how, Phaedre is really nice to this Skaldic boy who right before, he's a teenager, he's 18, 19. Right before she got there, he had been castrated, and since then, dead. And you don't realize then, but he knows who Phaedre is as far as his cultural narrative of his country goes. He knows who Phaedre is, but she's nice to him. She knows he's not in a good place, so she sings some of those Skaldic hearth songs that she learned from the Skaldic woman she hung out with during her slave time. She builds a bond, and she starts making friends with people, and eventually she realizes that the Makagir is falling in love with her, and that if he falls in love with her, he is going to be able to kill her. But she also realizes that if they kill the Makagir, all the Bone Priest's magic will go away. He is literally the funnel, the connection to Angra Mainyu. And she crafts this plan, and I fucking love it. This was such an awesome thing to see come together, because she starts trying to be rebellious, but the other women are like, no, listen, just because you're willing to go through pain, and apparently that's fine, not us, honey, not today. But there's a beautiful scene where they manage to get, again, the Zenon is boarded up, but they managed to open what used to be a door into a garden. And it's all these women who haven't seen sunlight in ages, and they're just standing in this gray, the dirt's been salted so you can't grow anything in it, but they're outside, they can smell the air, there's movement, but they're so fucking happy, and it begins to spark a bit of hope. Kanika eventually is like, okay, little one, let's do this. That's what Kanika calls her.
Also, again, the narrator, her work, accents, she's such an artist. Like, I don't understand how she does it.
She's so good. Like, Anne Flosnick, if you ever happen to stumble upon this,
MVP.
You are a BAMF. You are the standard for which I hold audiobook narrators. So basically there's going to be like this like feast night, and during this feast night is when a lot of the people who want to become bone priests are going to kill the people they love to become bone priests, and that's going to be the night now that, because Phaedre and the Makagir realize that he's in love with her around the same time, and she's like, oh no, this means they can do the thing, and she's like,
he's so happy that he has someone to kill. It's so
like,
weird.
She's like, you've given me such a gift, thank you, we're going to do amazing things together.
I have a gift to give to you. And she's like, oh, what is that? And he's like, you'll see, get pretty for it.
The gift is your death.
But with the excited enthusiasm of a child. But it's just like, so reading it is just mind-blowing as an experience. This really is Carey at her best in far of like the atmospheric, like what's happening, that you can feel the weight of all of this on Phaedre. You can feel it on Jacqueline, which is what makes when they leave it and everything just poofs off so much worse. And basically the plan is during this night, she is going to kill the Makagir. She gets the idea because Kanika has these hairpins. And she got them from someone else, but they're pointed and stabby. And she's like, oh, he trusts me. I am like the only human who can get close enough to him with no one else in a room to kill him. So her plan is when he takes her to kill her, he's going to stab her. And she gets a message to Jacqueline that like, listen, on this night, I need you to go to this door and kill the guards. And then like everyone in the Xenon is like, we're doing it. They've been collecting opium because they're going to opium poison the guards. So everybody passes the fuck out and nobody can fight back well. They get this massive ball. Like it's just like this whole, and like you heard about this one lady who had a kitchen guy who really liked her. And then it comes back where that's the guy that's going to poison like it's just such a great plan and it comes together.
And you can feel like the swell of hope too. And all these people fighting back after so much despair.
So good. That hope is infectious. You as the reader begin to feel that glimmer of like, are we going to get out of this? Because like you're like, oh god, this is heavy. Oh boy. Anyway, and the scene where she kills the Makagir is absolutely fantastic because Phaedre's only ever killed someone like one other time, and it was that Skaldic young boy who was just beginning to grow his beard in back when like her and Jacqueline were escaping. But she's managed to go this far without actually like bloodying her hands, and even then it was like she didn't know she was gonna have to kill that guy until it happened. But like she's had to sit with this knowledge that she's gonna kill the Makagir, and they go in and he starts like tightening because you have to garrote the person. You have to like choke them with something basically, and he starts choking her
with your bare hands.
It has to be your bare hands, and so
in the dark with one candle, which is too much light for the Makagir because
he spent so much time crushed under bodies for a while. He's not good with bright lights, so everything in the castle, like there's no fires ever, like it's real shit. And she ends up like stabbing him in the heart, and like she apologizes while she does it, and it's just this like affecting scene. He dies. Then she's like, oh no, the Makagir, something weird happened. And then people come in, she runs out, she locks them in, she runs, Jacqueline's doing his thing. And it's just this great battle. And then there's this part where like Jacqueline is literally like a wolf who has been unleashed. Like he is just this bloody,
and the harem is gone into like a killing frenzy where they just don't care. They're throwing themselves at the guards, and all the guards are trying to kill Jacqueline, and Jacqueline's just weaving death around him and smiling.
Bodies are just piling up around him. This is by far, and like Phaedre describes it as like his most epic fight that no one will ever know about because this is not the kind of thing you sing about. He ends up having a fight with the Makagir's giant bodyguard who actually loved the Makagir, and that guy crushes or like hurts his one hand, and which is not great because his entire like fighting style is built around,
both hands.
But anyway, they end up escaping. The Aka Magi come back. Their power has been restored. People start lighting fires everywhere in Darsanga, and he's basically like, so I will let you go out and you can get out and walk out just fine. But you need to tell Kabali Makad to leave us the fuck alone. Like, I need to rebuild.
One big thing we missed. At some point, her and Imriel bond.
It's a slow...
Yeah, there's a progression to it.
She tells him, like, his mother sent him, and he's like, my mother's dead. And she's like, actually, no, your mother's not. And then eventually he realizes Phaedre's not full of shit. They bond.
Some bad stuff happened to him.
He gets branded by a Mongolian guy.
Stuff before she got there, too, was pretty bad. So, like, Imriel's got trauma, which I did not feel was really handled enough in the rest of the book.
Oh, it is. The entire first book of his trilogy is just him. Like, he does not have sex when everybody else is having sex, because he just cannot.
I was wondering about that in terms of how much that affects his trilogy.
So much blowback in the first book. Like, the first book is him learning how, like, not only that he can have sex, and then the second book is you can have sex, but you can have sex where you, like, whip someone, and it's okay. It doesn't make you a monster, because he thinks
I was wondering about that,
he's a monster. Imriel, like, eventually, like, learns Jocelyn's a friend, too, and at one point, like, Jocelyn loses his sword, and Imriel's like, Jocelyn, I got it! And she's like, at one point, she's like, where's Imriel? And he's like, no, don't worry, he's safe. And then she realizes that Imriel's standing guard in case somebody comes, and she's like, you let him stand guard? And he's like, yeah, he wanted to help. Like, he's stubborn. He wasn't going to just stand in a room. I figured this was the better way. At least I know where he is. And she's like, we're going to talk about this later, Jocelyn. And at one point, Imriel is, like, cutting into the fray, like, hitting people. Like, he's like, there's this catharsis of all the, like, repression of inability to be able to do anything that everyone, the women in the Zenana, the guards who had been from the other country who had been turned into eunuchs and were now having to work for the people who did that to them, they're, like, feeling it. Like, there's just this, and it's terrible because she's looking at it and she's going, this is still ill deeds. This is still ill thoughts. Like,
yeah, she talks about how the Ogramanyu's spirit is filling the temple or the palace, and they are manifesting it. Essentially, they are gripped by it.
Because, like, they're all that negative emotion that they haven't been able to act on, they now have the ability, like, they can kill the people who did this to them. And so I liked it because it was her looking at this massacre happening and going, this is still a massacre.
Phaedre always has, like, a nice edge of, like, just not liking violence almost at any time. She always understands, like, the toll that it's going to take and the repercussions of it. We're going to kind of have to hurry through because this is taking a long time, actually, and we still have a third of the book to go.
So they get out. They make a deal where all of the women from the Zenana need to be returned to their home. Originally, she was going to go back to Iskandria and get the guide Melisande had for her, but Kanika is like, nah, I know where that is. Like, you'll come with me to my village, and then we'll send you off to the tribe of Dana. Like, that they're like neighbors. Don't worry about it. They end up going back to Kabali Makad, doing more traveling. I really enjoyed. Will didn't. I really enjoyed them traveling through Jebez and, like, seeing all the different cultures within it. You know, like, the way, like, it is along the Nile is different from how it is in Kanika's village.
Okay, here's the thing. Carey is really good at writing cultures. She's actually really good at writing traveling. I just don't care. We just defeated the villain, and now we're going into Africa for some reason, and I just don't care. And there's very little dealing with the trauma that just happened. Like, they're not thinking about it. They're not really talking about it. The most is that her and Jocelyn haven't made the sexy sex, and, like, that's about it. You're rubbing off on me because I never in my life would have said sexy sex before now.
The handling of the trauma in this is that it goes away. Like, it's just, It's gone. And again, that's why I think making it 2 books would have worked better, because I think Will is right. Having it where, like, because you're right, when you start a book, like, you kind of reset a little bit. You're willing to go in and say, okay, during that time, like, and especially if the narration is like, yeah, it took us a while to get back to normal, to be able to even look at each other, to have conversations that felt normal, like, that kind of thing. But because we just dive straight into it, and the thing is, like, again, Hyacinth's rescue has nothing to do with what just happened in Drujan. They just are happening to happen next to each other. Like, location-wise, it makes no sense to go home and then come back to go on this journey.
And the other thing is, there's nothing quite to look forward to in terms of in the future. Like, leading up to Drujan, you're like, okay, that's going to happen. That's going to happen. In this case, it's like, I'm not really waiting for any fun scenes to happen. I'm waiting for her and Jocelyn to get back to doing the boinking. But that's, like, about it in terms of things in the foreseeable future of the book that I cared about. And so it's, like, just a little meaningless.
I would have thought it would have worked better if there had been some time. Like, if after, because there's this whole issue where, like, Imriel is supposed to go back to Tierre immediately, and then he sneaks onto a ship and goes with them on the adventure through Africa when he shouldn't have. And there's this moment where Phaedre could like take him back and then go on the journey. And as much as that would have been dumb, I kind of think to end the book there, let them go back and then have something happen where, like, you know, Hyacinth's situation hasn't changed in 6 months. So 6 months it's been here. Like if he has to wait a year more, okay, that'll be fine. Like, it's not like there's a huge time limit. But if they had gone back to Tierre and then something happened where Hyacinth was actively in danger, or like something, like there was stakes that made it like, no, we have to rescue him now.
What happened at the beginning of this book with Hyacinth should happen at the beginning of book 4, and this should have just been the search for Imril.
Exactly.
Like with a vague, oh, I can help you out with Hyacinth in the future.
Exactly. And so I completely agree that that thing that happened where he became the Master of the Straits should have happened at the end of this book, and then that's how the next book started, or at the beginning of the next book, and that's the thing that gives tension to their journey, because it happened so long ago and we went on such a journey that the tension of that moment of him being like actually the Master of the Straits is gone.
Also, guys, I don't care about Hyacinth. He has a flower for a name. I just don't care. It's been such a long time since he was a character. I just don't care if he gets off that island or not.
And that's Will. So they have to go on this whole journey. They go a lot of cool places. I really liked Merowe, the Queen in Merowe. Like, there was a lot of cool stuff that happened.
Fantastic, cool cultures.
I liked going to Kanika's village, meeting her grandmother. I liked hearing the story of the Tribe of Dawn. And so basically what it is that the Tribe of Dawn had this pact of knowledge where, like, once upon a time, a king was like, the decision was wisdom first, like power second, and that you always had to, in whatever, it was always a male.
It's like a different version of the Solomon story with Bathsheba or whatever her name was.
It's supposed to be the same story,
but like from a different perspective.
The idea is that whoever's ruling the Tribe of Dawn, it has to be a man and a woman. They don't have to be husband and wife, but like it's this covenant of wisdom, and it's between these two people, and you, like, the wisdom has to be first. And once upon a time, like 1,000 years ago, one guy fucked it up, ended up taking control, but it was just him. He started a war with Merowe. It broke the covenant of wisdom. His people had to flee, and they've now been, like, isolated for 1,000 years in this specific place with, like, no real connection to the outside world at all. The thing about it is that when they broke the covenant of wisdom, they lost their ability to be able to read the tablet that had the name of God, because it broke. Like, it just broke. And so Phaedre's like, man, I hope this hasn't all been for nothing. They go in, they meet the Tribe of Dawn. I also really enjoyed this because it was like a moment where it was like, this is what, like, Judaism or the Yeshuite religion looked like back when it was just Habiru. And it wasn't like, it hadn't taken this new direction, because they don't even know God there was a Mashiach. Like, they don't know none of that. The Tribe of Dawn is like just Old Testament.
They've been in stasis, essentially.
The Tribe of Dawn has committed to just the men being in charge. They tell the council of male elders their story, what they're trying to do, and they're like, that really sucks, but no, we're not going to let you go see that. If anyone looks into there and starts fucking shit up, God will find us and he will be angry with us. When she tells them, like, nah, he kind of moved on, like, there's this whole other group of people, they're like even more angry. Like, they get upset. They're like, holy shit, we've been abandoned. All the women have made, like, this little, like, tribe of, like, women leaders, and they're like, you shall talk to our council, and they tell the story, and they were like, nah, go save your friend. We've been isolating ourselves and not doing anything. It's time to get something fucking done. Go do it. I did not love that I wish there had been a character from this group of people who went with Phaedre and was, like, necessary to see the name of God, because it really just felt like Phaedre, the foreign European lady, coming in, solving a problem that these people had for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And so I would have really loved if there had been a character who was very religious, who had always wanted to see it, to go see it, but he or she hadn't been able to because of this.
Thematically, it's just weird because Phaedre's religion doesn't really have much to do with their religion. They're kind of like, what is this Elo guy doing? But it's really like her having to engage with the philosophy and themes of somebody else's religion just to get this name of God thing. So they go to the Isle. They're not supposed to. A fight breaks out. By the way, this is how I describe stories when Maria's not around. There's a fight. She gets into a tomb. They have these priests that are, like, blind and deaf, deaf and mute.
Their tongues have been
Okay, all
shriveled.
right. I'm telling the story.
it.
And then she sees the name of God come out, and it's like, it's crazy. It's this massive thing that just dazes her. And then she comes out. And what happens is, after this point in the book, she kind of gets dazed a lot of times just looking at things because she sees the name of God in everything. And she can feel it on her tongue at all times, and it's hard for her not to say it. And I did like this idea. I find that kind of humans having to bear the weight of a god really interesting. And like, especially kind of an abstract god in the way that the Yeshwite god is, versus like a more concrete, like Thor type of a god. So I thought that was really cool. But and then they start back up the river. It's not a river. They start back up.
They have to go through the desert and then through the Nile. Like basically the journey they just made, they have to do it in reverse. Except now it's the rainy season.
I really don't think we're missing anything. Like, there's a lot of bonding between Imriel and like Jocelyn, and some with her.
Oh, there's the reconciliation scene that I actually really do like. There was a rhino. It attacked Jocelyn, who has been slowly trying to heal up his arm, get strength back into it, like fights it, and he throws a dagger, and it aims true, and he's like, I did it! I can still throw daggers! And he's so happy. And then him and Imriel go fishing, and they catch a really big fish. Him and Imriel are going to clean the fish, and Imriel's like, no, you go clean the fish by yourself. I'm going to go do something else. And then Imriel's like, Phaedre, you should go, I don't know, say hi to Jocelyn right now. Like, I love people just like, you guys need to reconcile, go have sex now.
And Imriel just wants Mama and Papa to get along again.
Because like at one point, Kanika and this dude smash, and Imriel's like, why don't you and Jocelyn ever do that kind of stuff? Like, what are you guys? Do you not love each other anymore, Mommy and Daddy? So he like sets them up, and like Jocelyn's like literally gutting a fish, and they end up hugging, and they get fish juice, so they have to shower, and then they have sex. And he was like, listen, if I had known, all I had to do was catch a big fish.
And that is how trauma is dealt with.
And then after that, they're fine.
I think the only reason why they actually ended up adopting Imriel was because of Jocelyn. Like, if it was just because, oh, Imriel has like some kind of connection to Phaedre because she helps make him escape or whatever, I don't think that would have worked. I think it's only because Jocelyn looks like a great dad, and like that works. Like, I'm not gonna say Phaedre's not a great mom. That's not what I'm saying, but I don't.
Yeah, I think it would have been interesting too that maybe Imriel comes to appreciate Phaedra through Jocelyn's eyes, like that, because he could have bond more with Jocelyn and then be like, okay, now I see what you see in her.
Yeah, because he hated her at first too. Like they basically, Imriel and Jocelyn went on the same journey of growing to love Phaedra, and it would have been great if that was like highlighted a bit more, you know? Like it just like missed opportunities.
So then the next big part is that they decide that they're going to stop by Melisande on the way back to Terre d'Ange because they've decided that they want to adopt Imriel. And this is going to be a problem because Imriel is part of the noble family.
Well, no, the reason they stop back is because what's his face gives her a letter from Melisande saying, I want to talk to you.
Well, yeah, but this is important to know with what happens with Melisande. Melisande and Imriel meet, and it's like Imriel just does not want anything to do with her.
Imriel doesn't know who he is. Eventually, before they got to what's its face,
Escandria.
Yeah, in Escandria, he finds out not only who he is, that he's a prince, but that his mother was a traitor, and he is super pissed. Like he is not happy about it. So then he meets his mother, and he was like, "Fuck you!"
And then the other thing is that also people keep trying to assassinate him, and so that's one of the reasons that they were okay with him like eloping with them to Africa. This is the part where Phaedra still is really weak-kneed when she sees Melisande. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. She faced death. She faced the darkest version of her want and like overcame it. And so like that she's still like all tingly and weak-kneed. And like the other thing is like she could just be like Yahweh or the highway, bitch, because she knows the name of God now. I really wanted to use that basically this whole video.
It seems like it.
It was bad.
Nobody asked you.
When does anybody ever?
The reason why I specifically would have wanted her to like not be so easily swayed by Melisande is because Melisande is like, from a king's perspective, Melisande is like the definition of like a bad dom, because doms are like supposed to actually, you know, care about their subs. She only cares about Phaedra, one, because you're mine, you're the best ever, and you're mine, blah blah blah. And like, oh well, if I kill you, I'll be cursed for 10,000 years in eternal whatever hell area. So like those are her two primary things. So like Melisande is like not, she's like an kind of abusive dom. And for like over 10 years with all the availability and like Jocelyn coping mechanisms and like all her assets, like in that long of a time that she's never gone through any type of like internal therapy to get past her doesn't make sense.
I totally agree. I would have liked to see more exploration of the way that, like, and more explicit talk about how Melisande is a bad dom, and like that Phaedra is now at the point where
She knows. She has enough experience.
It's like, to still be like, enthralled by that presence is one thing, to a point where it's like, it's very easy to like slip into that again, sure. But at the same time, she's not stupid. She's used to having this reaction to a ton of people. She can usually pull herself out of it if she needs to. Like, it just doesn't make sense that she never would have.
I completely agree. This was one of my, and this is something that happens at the end of the, like, it happens at the start of the book, but for me, I really have a problem with it after Drew John. Like, if there's anything that should have smacked Melisande Shahrazad's power out of Phaedra's fucking mouth, it is Drew John, and the Maca gear. And the thing is, because, like, you're right, from a growth perspective, Phaedra is not a 1-year-old sub at this point. She's not 2 years old, but like she is in La Serenissima.
2 years experience, let's clarify that.
She starts being a sub, and then she's 1 year. Anyway, she's got 10 years, 12 years under her belt at this point. This bitch experienced. And
right.
It shouldn't be, like, knee shaking, like
and especially because oh look, I now have basically 12 years of experience in BDSM world. I'm Phaedra, yay. Bad doms are everywhere,
and they're off-putting,
and it's super easy to be like attracted to that energy when you're like that kind of
young baby sub.
But at the same time, you get so much experience with dealing with bad doms. You get so much experience with like, okay, this is what people do, this is what I don't like. And sure, it's not always like ending a scene mid-scene or anything like that, but it doesn't compute that her with like the more experience than I would have at this point, and she wouldn't recognize that and like shut it off.
And she's also getting all of her emotional needs met by Jocelyn. So it's not even an emotional insecurity thing that's making her teeter.
It's a different connection with the dom. Like, there's a different type of emotional need there
that Jocelyn is definitely not doing.
No, I get that. But in terms of, we don't see Phaedra missing that. That was part of my thing, is that we don't see Phaedra missing that kind of an emotional connection with the dom.
And it would be something if she was, and that is why at the start of the book she was attracted to Melisande Shahrazad, because she's not regularly getting that thing that Melisande has. But after Drew John, what the fuck are we doing? And again, I think it's that Carey wanted there to be this like almost spiritual, magical connection between these two characters. But like Phaedra deals with like a lot, and like Will said, she's literally got the name of God on her fucking tongue. Like,
like what are we doing?
What are we doing? Like, how powerful is their spiritual connection in the grand scheme of everything Phaedra's gone through? So
basically, Phaedra like goes, okay, we'll take care of Imriel, but you gotta promise to not assassinate the queen and her daughters.
Melisande saw through this, but she used the whole idea of, we will adopt Imriel so that he'll be raised outside of the queen's influence of making him hate you or something. So like, maybe you can have a relationship like in the future, maybe if he wants it. That's her way of like suing for peace with Melisande, of like, we'll care for Imriel, but you can't like assassinate anyone. But again, at the end, like after she agrees to it, Melisandre's like, yeah, I know you were gonna take care of my son anyways. Like, I gave it to you, but I'll honor it. So that actually was character growth on Melisandre's part.
What I kind of liked was, because before she does this with Melisande, like Jocelyn's like, can we keep him? And then Imriel's like, I don't want to leave. And then Phaedra's like, I can do this, but also use it to my advantage. Because she realizes, yeah, he's ours now. Like, it's like she was the like dad who didn't want the dog, but now she loves the dog. And
see, that's my point. That's why I said he only really came to their family because of Jocelyn.
There's also all this stuff about the stuff they sacrifice for true love with Eloa, love as a will. So she's now willing to give up these things for Imriel. I didn't think it was really set up the best. I think there's also a point later where, Jocelyn is almost going to jump overboard to help out Phaedra with something. And I would have liked it to be more like, no, we have a child now. That love is not just between ourselves. It's between the three of us. And you now owe it to Imriel to not just throw your life after her.
Imriel calls out and he's like, Jocelyn! And then Jocelyn's like, oh shit, yeah, there's a kid now.
Yeah, I would have liked that to be a little more explicit. Anyway, they go back to Terre d'Ange, or TD. There, the queen is really pissed about the whole thing, but Phaedre has a companion star, which means she can do whatever she wants one time. And so,
Do
Imriel...
we have the...
I was going to say, we completely forgot to do cards this whole time.
So we've had our 2 climaxes, which was climax in Drujon, climax to get the name of God, because it was very climactic, then back to TD. Right there, back to TD. Now we're moving into free Hyacinth.
The queen is like, okay, you got to hang out here for a couple months because that's your punishment before you can go free Hyacinth. So they go up north, they get on a ship, and they meet Hyacinth. And now Maria can take over with her more detailed, evocative, lyrical style.
This part, I think, is important. And again, had these books been structured a little bit different, it would have been great. Because basically what happens is everybody's like, what's your plan? And she has a plan that she hasn't told anyone, and then she has a general plan. And what they learned before is if Hyacinth tries to walk off of the island, it opens this weird realm, like rift in the sea, and like the angel of Rahab can be seen, like, and you can feel his presence. And so her plan is to get him to walk off the island so that the angel of Rahab can come out, and then she will use the name of God to bind him and get him to fuck off. Hyacinth can't withstand the pain it physically causes him to walk off the thing long enough to open it to do anything. And then Phaedre's like, okay, time for plan 2. And then I immediately realized what plan 2 was, and I was like, oh, Phaedre, you crafty bitch. And what it is that her entire life, like, she's been Kushiel's dart, and she's been able to withstand pain for the good, like, I mean, obviously for assignations and stuff, but like the moments when she's had to really withstand pain have been in service to something, either in service to Tierre d'Ange, like that scene where she like escapes to warn the tower, and then her back gets flayed, in book 2, where like there's a lot of moments where she has to withstand pain in the service to something else, for like her country, for her god. And this is a point where you're like, she gets to use her ability as Kushiel's dart for her own ends, because she realizes he can't withstand that, but I can. So I can use this thing that Kushiel gave me in service of him, and I can use it for my own ends. And so she gets high, she jumps off, she goes onto the island, which means the thing is invoked where like now she has to take over for him, and which means she can't leave anymore either. So she then forces herself to walk out from the island, and she can withstand this incredible amount of pain. And so it's this like duel with like where Rahab comes, and her and Rahab are yelling at each other on the water. The sea's going crazy. She made Hyacinth send the ship away, but then Rahab brought the ship back with all the people she loved on it, and she binds him with the name of God. No one can understand what's being said, really. She frees Hyacinth. Huzzah! Hyacinth decides to marry Justin Mabnectina's daughter or sister. But there's a fun moment on the ship afterwards where she's talking to this one Yeshuite scholar who's like, he's like a spiritual scholar. And he was like, did you hear it? What the name of God was? I mean, she's like, obviously, but like, I don't know what it was. And she was like, it's funny. I heard a word and I wasn't sure about it. So I started asking everyone, and everybody heard in their language, like at the heart of the name of God, in their language, they heard the word for love. I would have liked this better if the Christian God was at all as, because like Eloah is a very loving God.
Well, and specifically the Yeshuite God is the Old Testament God.
And he's presented not as a very loving God. It's because it again is Old Testament God, wrath, fire, punishment kind of thing. And so the idea that his name at the core of it is love, I just didn't feel was as impactful as it could have been if work had been done to show him like those punishments were done for a greater good, to take humanity to new, like
thematically also it just doesn't connect back to her faith or what's being said about faith.
Yeah, it does, because her faith is founded on love, so it makes sense that...
Well, no, like her struggle with faith, like from previous, like
Got it.
Her faith is founded on love, but that has nothing to do with that God.
And Hyacinth is very changed by this whole experience. He's very much like more sedate and more chilled out, and him and Phaedre, like, they talk about the romantic connection, but honestly, it's been like 3 books, and like I didn't think they had.
I also never thought they had a huge romantic connection. Like
Me either.
It felt almost like a very mild childhood crush of like, I wonder what would have happened, and like you only get like so far, and then you're like, no, that never would have worked.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, for her to act like it had been one of the great options of her life would have been like her or Jocelyn were like Hyacinth or Jocelyn were her great love. Like, nah, I never felt that. I felt like you and Jocelyn were a great love. I never. Anyway, and it basically ends. They go back to Tierre d'Ange, and she holds a party. She puts together a massive party in Knight's doorstep, which is
A fete.
a fete.
Fete.
And
Fate.
it's a
Fete.
okay.
I know what you're doing.
Stop it, you two. Don't engage him. He is a child. He will continue forever. And she puts on this huge party in honor of Hyacinth.
The biggest that Tierre d'Ange
Has ever seen. It's like the entire city. The queen shows up into Knight's doorstep, which is like the seedy part of town. Like guards stop. Like it's just this huge, massive party. It's very fun, and it was a nice, distinctive ending for a book that had 3 climaxes.
I was so bored by the end. Honestly, I was just like, "Will this not?" Part of it also is I had to finish it last night because I haven't had enough time to read for various reasons. I was just so like, all right, are we done with this? Are we done? Are we done? Are we done? And so like, I feel like the book, the series, I think kind of ends with a whimper when it started with such promise in the first book for me. Again, I think Jacqueline Carey is a fantastic writer. I just don't, it's funny because I kind of want to see what happens to Imriel, but I kind of don't want to wait through 30 hours of it, which is what it's going to be on Audible. And so, like, that's kind of the thing with Jacqueline Carey is, like, that's a lot of pages. And I know a lot of it's going to not be super relevant to what's I actually care about. Again, I'm kind of interested in terms of the blowback of the trauma and how he deals with that. And then also, I think he gets with one of the queen's daughters, which sounds interesting.
Sidonie. It's such a...
Is that the one he was friends with here?
It's the older, really prissy one.
Okay, that's what I was hoping. I was hoping it was the not cool one because that sounded more interesting. Overall thoughts on this book and the series. I think this book is good. I think it's the worst of the 3, and I feel like it could be so much better if like 200 pages were gone from it, or if it was just 2 books. Overall, I'm really glad I read this trilogy. You know, I think there's a lot going on with it that I think is really interesting, and I really appreciate how Jacqueline Carey writes. It has distinct weaknesses, I think, that come from Carey's style. What do you think, Gina?
So I'm actually, because we've spent so many, like 2 hours talking about this now, I'm actually going to change my opinion of it.
Fickle thy name is woman.
I think my favorite book, realistically speaking, is the first one. I know I've been saying that it was this one, but I think the reason why I thought, like, after first read through, like in the other videos, I hadn't read the third one again. The third book, I think, has a lot of like adventure and like it's very thought-provoking for me, particularly for a lot of the Jujar reasons and like things like that. So I think that's why I got like super attached to it. Mm-hmm. But I think as far as like the one I enjoyed the most that I felt like was, for me, written, in my opinion at least, written the best, that like had the most purpose behind it, I think that was the first book.
I would agree. I think for me, my favorite actually is the second one. I like a lot of the...
You like Pirate Kazan.
But the thing is, it's not Pirate Kazan.
It's stupid Illyrian.
It's the La Serenissima part. I liked the mystery, especially the second read through. That building dread to the reveal of who Melisandre. So like it's weird because I love the parts I really love of the second book is before Pirate Kazan and after Pirate Kazan. I enjoy Pirate Kazan and I like him, but that's not why I love that book. You could remove that entire section out of the book and I would enjoy that book as much. And it's kind of like where I really, really liked the Scaldia version part, and I liked more than Will the going to the Scotland analog. But for me, what really holds me back from thinking, because I think the first book is the tightest of the 3, but that first third, I can't. I'm not here for it.
Okay, so here's a question then. Should we read another Jacqueline Carey series? Because I would think it'd be interesting, and I think Maria mentioned this too, to read a different series.
I want to read a different one.
At some point, I'll probably read Imriel's trilogy, or at least try to get through it, though I don't know necessarily for a video or not.
No, I would like to, especially with the two of you, because we've come from this background of now reading this book, seeing what her writing is like not in Tierre d'Ange, not with Phaedre as the main character. Because I will say, like, there is a difference in tone, and especially like with Imriel, the way sex is described is very different than the way Phaedre describes it. We discussed last time how Phaedre definitely describes sex as someone who's good at her craft, and Imriel is definitely like enjoying the sex in a way that is like and you spend way more time in the description of sex scenes with Imriel than ever with Phaedre. It almost makes me feel like there is more sex in those books than there is in these books, even though Imriel is not a courtesan of the Night Court at any point.
That's very funny.
But I would like to try one of her other things and see what that's like, especially because this is the first trilogy she wrote. Like, this is it. This is where her writing...
I mean, it's a great debut trilogy.
Great debut trilogy. I mean...
That is very well known in the BDSM community.
So if you guys would like us to read another Jacqueline Carey book, let us know in the comments. We also have a Patreon if you would like. You could nominate one in our book club poll and maybe it would win. And we would do a live stream with you guys. Let us know. Leave a comment for engagement. Leave us a like for engagement. And until next time, we love you, our parasocial darlings.
Bye, guys.
And mention that I'm your favorite guest host ever.
Gina's our
Okay,
favorite.
we don't have any other guest hosts. Bye.
That's why I'm your best
Yes.
guest host.
Our favorite, bestest, guestest host.